So fellas, we've just come off UFC 310 and we've got to do some matchmaking. We're going to be going through every prelim fight, matchmaking all the winners, and then we'll go through every single fighter on the main card, whether they won, whether they lost, and matchmaking them into fights. I will put timestamps as well in the video if you want to go to a specific fight or a specific area. But yeah, we'll start off with the first fight, Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Lucas Brzeski. Kennedy Nzechukwu won, and I think he should fight Martin Badai. You could give him somebody in the rankings because he beat Lucas Brzeski. He's got 2 first-round KOs now in the heavyweight division, but he hasn't really beaten anyone good. But I understand it's the heavyweight division, so if you put him at number 15th over like Shamil Gaziev, I could see that happening. But I feel like if he wants to earn his way into the heavyweight division, beating Martin Badai's the guy to do it, because Badai, I know he gets a lot of hate for being a boring fighter, but he's only really lost to Shamil Gaziev himself. He's probably the best unranked heavyweight out there, so I think these can kind of be a fight between the 2 best unranked heavyweights. I think it's winnable for Nzechukwu as well. Badai's got kind of, terrible boxing. He kind of just holds people against the cage and does a lot of work there. I think if Nzechukwu is smart, he can get this one in the bag, and then he can get a ranked opportunity. He gets maybe like a Mick Parkin or a Waldo Cortez Acosta. But I don't think we should kick anyone necessarily out the rankings. I think the rankings in the heavyweight division right now are pretty good. Keep them all in. Get Nzechukwu in there against Badai. 2 of the best unranked heavyweights going at it. Step up for Nzechukwu as well. I mean, Lucas Brzeski, the dude's been knocked out, I think, in his last 3 fights by Waldo Cortez Acosta in the first round, Mick Parkin in the first round, and now Nzechukwu in the first round. So it's not like he's just beating UFC worthy. And before that, he beat Chris Barnett, who Martin Badai's also finished. So I think we'll do Martin Badai, Kennedy Nzechukwu, when he gets a shot in the rankings. But yeah, that's what I think should happen for Nzechukwu. And then for Chase Hooper, dominated Clay Guida. Now it's time for the step up. He's looked good at 155. He beat Borshev, he beat Guida. And I think we should do him versus Nasrat Haqparast. Nasrat Haqparast, he's up and coming in the lightweight division, but I don't think he's going to be like anything serious. I don't think he's got like tons of potential. In his last fight against Jared Gordon, he robbed Jared Gordon. He did do well with the boxing, but again, he's a very striking heavy guy. Nasrat Haqparast. I think this is a winnable fight for Chase Hooper, but it's also a step up from somebody like Clay Guida, who shouldn't really be in there with him. Haqparast, like I said, on a bit of a winning streak, good boxing, takedown defense isn't that bad. I think it's a good fight where we can really see how good Chase Hooper is, and if Chase Hooper can get past somebody like Nasrat Haqparast, which would be a good win, that's where you got to start talking about him potentially facing like 1 or 2 more guys before he gets an opportunity at the rankings in the lightweight division. Like if he beats Nasrat Haqparast, maybe it's time we give him somebody like Mitabek Orobai, or even like a, I don't know, like a Fares Ziam or a Yoel Alvarez or a Diego Ferreira, someone that's going to get him into the rankings. But I think Nasrat Haqparast will be a good test for Chase Hooper, and it's good for Nasrat as well because he's got a lot of controversy over his most recent win over Jared Gordon, where it was a fun fight, but he shouldn't have been given the win. If he can shut down, I guess, a prospect in the 155 division in Chase Hooper, that's going to do big things for Nasrat Haqparast. That's going to get him big fights, and that's going to move him close to the ranking. So I think we do Haqparast versus Chase Hooper. For Chase Hooper. And then for Michael Chiesa, said he wants 1 more fight, and I think Michael Chiesa versus Nicholas Dalby could be a good fight. Chiesa, he's probably a top 25 welterweight in the world. He's not the most skilled, at least from like the aesthetics perspective. He doesn't look the best, but he pulls off wins. He beat Ferguson this year, which doesn't really mean much, and then he went out there and submitted Max Griffin as well. So he's got 2 submissions in the first round now. Not in the first round, but 2 submissions in a row. He said he wants to fight early next year. I think Nicholas Dalby's the perfect time. Nicholas Dalby was supposed to fight a few weeks ago on one of the fight nights. He had to pull out. So he's going to be wanting to get in there as soon as possible. So I think you do Dalby Chiesa on a fight night in February. This should be a fun fight stylistically as well, because on the feet, I'd definitely say Dalby's the better guy on the feet, but it's not like he's absolutely insane. And he's kind of got this pressure wrestling style where he likes taking people down and holding them against the cage, which is what Chiesa's going to want you to do with a jiu-jitsu heavy style of Michael Chiesa. So I think we'll do Michael Chiesa versus Nicholas Dalby for Chiesa's last fight in the UFC, if this is going to be his last fight. If he can beat Nicholas Dalby, that's a big win for him to end off his UFC career, because apart from a close fight with Renat Fakhretdinov, Nicholas Dalby's been in an absolute terror. And if Nicholas Dalby can beat Michael Chiesa in his last fight, which I think he probably will, that's going to get Nicholas Dalby some big fights in the welterweight division. Maybe even a ranking, not a ranking spot, but a ranking fight in the welterweight division against somebody that's coming off a loss. So, Michael Chiesa, Nicholas Dalby, I think that makes all the sense. And then for Joshua Van versus Steve Erceg. This fight would feed generations in the flyweight division. I feel like the flyweight division, even though there's not really any big names for Pantoja to fight, with the addition of the likes of Kaya Sakura and Tatsuro Taira, and now obviously Joshua Van, this division is becoming really fun. Joshua Van versus Steve Erceg would feed generations. This fight on the feet might be the fight between the 2 best boxers in the division. Joshua Van has basically been able to pick apart everyone but Charles Johnson on the feet. Came off a knockout earlier this year, got a win over Edgar Showers and just absolutely destroyed Cody Durden. Steve Erceg knocked out Matt Schnell this year, lost in a close fight to Pantoja, which has aged really well, and then obviously got knocked out by Kai Kara France a few months later. But I think this would be such a good fight in the flyweight division. Some of the best best boxers, some of the best combinations that you're going to see, one of the highest level striking matchups that you could possibly see in the flyweight division. Have this on like some sort of pay-per-view, maybe do on the Perth card if it's not too quick of a turnaround for Joshua Van, which it probably is, but either way, Van versus Usyk is massive. If Usyk can pick up a win over Joshua Van, he's stolen the hype of Joshua Van. And that's going to get Usyk back in the winning column, which I'm sure he wants to do because he's on a 2-fight losing streak. And if Joshua Van can get a win over Steve Usyk, who's a fairly big name after his main event over Pantoja, and his co-main event at 305, that's going to do big things for Joshua Van as well, give him somebody maybe even in the top 5. So Joshua Van, Steve Usyk, one of the aesthetically most pleasing fights you can do in the flyweight division. I think it'll be an absolute banger. So yeah, Van, Usyk, maybe do it for Perth, but if not, do it on like UFC 313, 314. That'll be a banger of a fight. And then for Eric Anders, I think Paul Craig, I know I booked Paul Craig to fight Nordiev after his last win at UFC 309, but after I'm looking at that fight, it doesn't really make sense to give Nordiev a name in Paul Craig. So I think we'll do Eric Anders versus Paul Craig. This is probably the most winnable fight you can give to Paul Craig. You've got Eric Anders, who's very slow on the feet. Paul Craig, as bad as he is defensively on the feet, he's got decent kicks. I think he could win in the striking exchange. And Eric Anders got dropped by Chris Weidman. And then when it comes to the ground game, if Eric Anders takes him down, that's where Paul Craig wants to be. He's amazing on his back. I feel like we say the same thing every single Paul Craig fight. If he gets taken down, he's got the Hail Mary submissions, but he hasn't been able to show it since I think he fought Nikita Krylov or whatever his last submission was. So, Paul Craig, Eric Anders, I think it's a good fight between two kind of washed middleweights. Winnable fight for Paul Craig. If Eric Anders can win, that's a 2-fight winning streak for him, fair play. If Paul Craig can beat Eric Anders, he's got back in the winning column. I guess it's a good fight for both of them. Should be a fun fight between two washed middleweights. Put it on like the prelims of the next pay-per-view or like on a fight night opener for a main card in the Apex. Anders, Craig. And then for Brian Battle, I want to give this dude a step up, man. He's a big personality in the welterweight division. Had a very close fight, missed weight, but he still pulled through Randy Brown. He seems to be a very durable fighter, as Brian Battle. I think we do this. Brian Battle versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. 5 rounds in a fight night main event, because I think this is going to favour Brian Battle, if anything. I think he does better when the fight goes longer. We saw it in his fight with Kevin Jessett, where he was unloading in the later rounds. He won the last 2 rounds against Randy Brown. Brian Battle's a longer round fighter. You put him in there with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of the most seasoned strikers. Now, Thompson's had a rough past couple of fights, obviously, getting submitted by Shavkat Rakhmonov and knocked out a year later by Buckley. He's going to want to come back. Let him fight down outside the rankings. Brian Battle, give him a ranking opportunity. Brian Battle versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. This could easily be like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Kevin Holland, where Stephen Thompson shows that there's absolute levels to this and absolutely picks apart Brian Battle. Or Brian Battle could make a name off a legend in Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in a fight night main event. And if Brian Battle could pull off a win, that would be huge for his career. He'd be a massive welterweight star. So this would just be such a fun fight to see. Pressure striker who likes to make the fight grueling in Brian Battle. Defensively really good when it comes to takedowns and one of the best strikers in the welterweight division. Stephen Thompson, Brian Battle, fight night main event in a crowded arena. Who the fuck says no to this one? And then for Movsar Evloev, I want to see him versus Volk. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, let's do Evloev versus Topuria. Even though I think Evloev he's got a good resume, he's probably got a better resume than Diego Lopez. I still want to see the fight between Lopez and Topuria. I think after Lopez beat Brian Ortega, he kind of earned that opportunity. I want to see Lopez versus Topuria early next year, maybe UFC 313, 314, whenever it is. And then I want to see Volkanovski versus Evloev. I think this should be the fight to make. I always said the winner of Evloev and Stillen should face Volk, because first reason, there is no threat on the feet for Volkanovski. He's been knocked out in his last 2. There's no KO threat in this fight. You don't have to worry about getting KO by Movsar Evloev. The dude's never finished anyone in his UFC career. Not really got too much power on the feet, so he's danger-free. And then when it comes to grappling, obviously Evloev's got the grappling advantage, but Volkanovski's displayed good takedown defense before. I think this is really winnable for both of them. If Volkanovski can beat Movsar Evloev, he's shut down 19-0 undefeated Evloev, and he's now going to get a title shot with some hype. And for Evloev, if he can beat Volk, he's beating arguably one of the best featherweights of all time. That's going to guarantee him a ticket to the title shot again. I don't mind the idea of Evloev getting an immediate title shot, but I think that fight with Volkanovski in like some sort of pay-per-view main event or co-main event would be the fight that makes sense to kind of legitimize both of them next in the title picture. Volk's been KO'd in his last 2. As much as he deserves an immediate rematch, I don't know if I favour his odds. And Evloev, let's give him that one extra big fight. Evloev versus Volk. And then for Vicente Luque, he called out Jorge Masvidal. You know what? Let's just do it. Because there's no one else really for Vicente Luque. Because you look at most of the people that are coming off a loss that are ranked above him. I mean, Jeff Neal, I mean, he's coming off a win, but Jeff Neal's battered him before. A lot of people in this division have just battered Vicente Luque before. Gilbert Burns ain't going to fight me because they're training partners. There's not really anyone else for Vicente Luque that makes sense, and I think he called out Jorge Masvidal saying that he wants to come back. This would just be a slaughter of Jorge Masvidal, but I don't know why. I don't know why not. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Vicente Luque versus Jorge Masvidal. Luque goes out there and demolishes Jorge Masvidal. He's beating a big name. He's got some hype back. He's going to be on a 2-fight winning streak. And from there, we can get some more big fights in the welterweight division and go on a bit of a run again, which I never thought I'd say. But yeah, for Jorge Masvidal, said he wants to come back. Fight number 14th Vicente Luque, like I said, probably gets destroyed. Even prime Masvidal probably loses to current Vicente Luque, because the division's just changed a lot. But if you're talking about current Masvidal, the fat, overweight Masvidal that's not taking training seriously, I think Vicente Luque absolutely does him. Luque, Masvidal, do it on some sort of pay-per-view. Big fight and big win for Vicente Luque. And then for the prelim headliner, Dominic Reyes versus Alexander Rakic. I know a lot of people are going to be looking at this saying, oh, this is way too big of a step up for Dominic Reyes. He's only beating Anthony Smith. Guess who's only beating Anthony Smith as well? Alexander Rakic has only beaten... Alexander Rakic's best win is Anthony Smith. And he couldn't even get him out there as Dominic Reyes did. Alexander Rakic has to be one of the most highly rated, for no reason, fighters in the UFC. Who is this dude beat apart from Anthony Smith, who Dominic Reyes just slaughtered? No one. Thiago Santos, he's not in the UFC anymore as a middleweight. He lost to Jan Blachowicz by injury, fair enough. He got finished by Yuri Prohaska. Just lost to Magomed Ankalaev. He's lost to Volkan Oezdemir before as well. This dude's only praised because he looks good losing. You know what I mean? I think it's probably the most easy way to get Dominic Reyes in the top 5 of the light heavyweight division, which I never thought I'd say. It's winnable for Dominic Reyes. Rakic is a kickboxer with not really any grappling. He's not the most dangerous kickboxer as well. I know he's got very high level striking, but even though I would favour Rakic to win this fight by some sort of decision, I think it's probably the easiest way to get Reyes back in the top 5. I mean, who else do we do for Reyes? The loser of Krylov and Mirzakhanov, that's arguably a more dangerous fight for Reyes. So, Reyes versus Rakic. Rakic hasn't beaten anyone good. His best win is Anthony Smith. Reyes has just slaughtered Anthony Smith. His best win is John Jones. So, Reyes, Rakic, maybe a fight night main event in the Apex or do it on some sort of pay-per-view main card. And if Reyes can pull through and beat Alexander Rakic, Reyes being on a 3-fight winning streak and ranked in the top 5 of the light heavyweight division is something I never thought I'd expect. So for Reyes, let's see him versus Alexander Rakic. And then for the loser of the main card, let's do Nate Landwehr versus Pat Sabatini. Nate Landwehr got, I'm going to be honest, he got dominated by Doo Ho Choi. Wasn't really a competitive fight in the slightest. Doo Ho Choi looked amazing. I think a scrap for Nate Landwehr. He's all about scrapping. He's not here to go on a title run. He's not going to do anything crazy in the UFC. He's 37 years old and he can't even make it into the rankings. Let's do him versus Pat Sabatini. Now, obviously, Sabatini got battered by Diego Lopez early this year. He's pulled off a couple of wins. Recently submitted Jonathan Pierce. And I think this would be a really good fight for Pat Sabatini because they're both very good jiu-jitsu. They've both got a very similar style of being scrappy on the feet while having a good jiu-jitsu base. Pat Sabatini's an amazing grappler. Nate Landwehr's got really good jiu-jitsu. They both come to scrap on the feet. I think this would be a really fun fight to see between the two of them. It's winnable for both of them. If Pat Sabatini can beat Nate Landwehr, he's going to get close to the rankings of the featherweight division. And if Nate Landwehr can beat Pat Sabatini, which I think he could, and I probably favour him to beat Pat Sabatini at this moment in time, he's come off another win. Nate the Train's in the winning column. So Nate Landwehr versus Pat Sabatini, in my opinion, would be an absolute scrap for the featherweight division. And then for Doo Ho Choi, I want to see him versus Sadiq Youssef. There's going to be people that say, oh, give him a ranking opportunity, and I'm not against it, but who do we really put him against? Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza's booked. I think I want to see him one more win before he gets a ranking, because you got to realise he was on a bit of a losing streak, losing to the likes of Charles Jourdain and Cub Swanson as well. And he's only just come back this year, beat Bill Autio. Now he's gone out there and beaten Nate Landwehr, who wasn't really the best unranked featherweight out there. I think we do Doo Ho Choi versus Sadiq Youssef. This would be a really fun fight to see. Sadiq Youssef, he was ranked 1 win ago. He lost to Diego Lopez, and now suddenly he's not ranked, so he only lost to the best in Lopez. Really powerful striker, Sadiq Youssef. Great boxing. I think this would be a really good test for Doo Ho Choi. If Doo Ho Choi can go out there and have a performance against Sadiq Youssef like he did to Nate Landwehr, give him somebody not even in the rankings, but in the top 10 of the featherweight division. Again, I don't think we should give him a ranking opportunity just yet, because I feel like we give away these ranking opportunities too good. But Sadiq Youssef, a comeback fight, him versus Doo Ho Choi, equally as big of a banger as Nate Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi would be. Great way we can kind of display Doo Ho Choi against the current state of the featherweight division. If he beats Sadiq Youssef, give him somebody in the top 10, absolute banger. And then for Kron Gracie, well, for Kron Gracie, I just don't want to see him fight anymore, you know what I mean? He's got no personality whatsoever, never heard him speak. He's a boring fighter, ruins every single fight that he's in. He's got a record of 5-3. He doesn't bring anything to the UFC apart from a last name that he didn't even build. It was his grandfathers that built his last name for him. So, Royce Gracie, I want to see him cut from the UFC. I hope we never see him in the octagon again. Maybe we can see him on some of those grappling tournaments, but even then he was getting out grappled by Bryce Mitchell, so you never know. And then for Bryce Mitchell, him versus Calvin Kattar. I think this makes all the sense. Bryce Mitchell versus Calvin Kattar in like an Apex main event, I think would make a lot of sense, because Calvin Kattar, I don't know every single name, but he's lost to the majority of the featherweight division is Calvin Kattar. I know he beat and battered Giga Chikadze not too long ago, but most of the featherweight division has been able to pull off a win over Calvin Kattar. In his most recent fight, he got absolutely wrestle fucked by Aljamain Sterling, and I think you've got an opportunity, a path to victory there for Bryce Mitchell if you've watched that fight. Bryce Mitchell's coming off a win by dominating Kron Gracie with the grapple, and I think this would be a really fun fight. You've got a really slick boxer who can, on his good day, beat a lot of the featherweights in Calvin Kattar. You've got a grappler with a lot of potential, which is kind of the nightmare matchup for Calvin Kattar and Bryce Mitchell. I think this would just be a good fight for a Fight Night main event. If Mitchell wins, gets him in the top 10 again. If Calvin Kattar wins, he's just beating a big name in Bryce Mitchell, gets him back in the winning column again. I think this fight makes all the sense for the current stages of the career. Calvin Kattar, Bryce Mitchell, Apex main event, who says no? And then for Gane and Volkov. Volkov versus Almeida. Now, even though, see, this is the problem. Volkov won the fight. You know what I mean? I hope the UFC treat Volkov as if he won the fight. What I think the UFC should do is they should do Tom Aspinall versus John Jones, and then they should do Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira. If we're really trying to keep some hype in the title picture of the heavyweight division, that's what we need to do. In the meantime, Alexander Volkov versus Almeida. I know Almeida is booked against Spivak, but he's going to run through him. Volkov versus Almeida next year in a Fight Night main event in like some sort of crowded area, or put it on like a Saudi Arabia card or whatever, to determine who fights Tom Aspinall after his fights with Jones and Alex Pereira, to determine who's going to be the next big #1 contender of the heavyweight division. Volkov, in my eyes anyway, is on a 5-fight winning streak. Jailton Almeida is the best grappler in the division. Put the two kind of forces against each other. Whoever comes out on top faces Aspinall after he's faced Poatan and John Jones. I think it makes all the sense. I don't want to see Volkov versus like a Sergey Spivak after what he's done in the heavyweight division recently. He beat Alexander Volkov. It was a complete robbery. I'm still pissed because that was my underdog pick. But yeah, Volkov, Almeida. And then for Cyril Gane, do he Curtis Blades? I don't want to see him get put back in the title picture. This guy's had such a lucky career. He gets a win over Derek Lewis, and then by beating Derek Lewis, he gets the title fight with Ngannou. Ngannou beats him really comfortably. Then he beats Tai Tuivasa in France, gets another title shot immediately against John Jones, gets mauled and destroyed by Jones. Then he beats Spivak in Paris and loses and robs Alexander Volkov. And now we're talking about him being in the title picture. No, I want to see Gane prove that he's a top contender. Let's see him against Curtis Blades, who he's ducked before. Let's give Gane a fight that's out of his comfort zone. Cyril Gane versus Curtis Blades. This is actually be a really 50-50 fight, because you've got Gane, who's improved his grappling, and he's a decent... He's one of the best strikers in the division, but he's obviously got a grappling flaw. And you've got Curtis Blades, who's a heavy wrestler, but it seems like every big fight that he gets in, he can't get past. So it's a tough one to pick. It's stylistically a bad fight for Cyril Gane because of the wrestling of Blades, who's been able to out-wrestle Volkov before. Gane versus Blades. If Gane wants to prove that he's a top contender, put him in there with a top contender. You know, don't give him like another Marcin Tibera to prove that he's a top contender. Do Gane versus Blades. I'm sick of Gane getting these big opportunities. Do him versus Curtis Blades. Treat the Volkov as if he won the fight with the matchmaking. And yeah, that's what I think we should do for those guys. And then the co-main event, Ian Garry versus Carlos Prates. Ian Garry looked really good against Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he proved that he's still a top contender. I don't think he lost any stock in that fight, even though he lost the fight. He didn't lose any stock. Let's see him versus Carlos Prates. Now, even though I think this fight would probably be Ian Garry just completely out-wrestling Carlos Prates, we need to give Prates a big step up, man. I think on a good day, Prates can do well. I'd say Prates is probably the better striker than Ian Garry. I mean, when has Ian Garry really been able to get going with his striking in his past couple of fights? Against Jeff Neal, the guy who Prates slaughtered in the first round, barely by the skin of his teeth outstruck Jeff Neal, Neil Magny, I mean. Barely outstruck Jeff Neal, had to grapple with MVP, got outstruck by Shavkat. I think Garry versus Prates is a good fight. Gary's coming off a loss, number 6 in the division. Prates is coming off a massive winning streak of KOs. It's a big step up for Prates, a big opportunity. He's been calling for a big fight. I think it'd be really fun to see on the feet. And for Ian Garry, if he can beat Carlos Prates, he's just shut down another big name in the welterweight division, and from there, he's going to get Garry back in the winning column, and you can maybe give him a #1 contender fight if he beats Carlos Prates. Like, maybe you can give him like a Sean Brady, or even a Leon Edwards, or a Jack Del Maddalena, somebody who's going to get him close to that title picture, which I know he wants. So, Garry versus Prates in the welterweight division, great high-level fight. Could be an amazing striking matchup, but Gary's probably going to take it to the mat. And then for Shavkat, it's got to be Shavkat versus Bilal. Fair play to Shavkat, to be fair. I mean, he didn't have to take this fight with Ian Gary. He was supposed to be fighting for the belt regardless. Now he's just got an extra win in the winning column anyway. Went to his first decision against Ian Gary, so he's no longer this guy who's finished everyone he's fought. I think Bilal Muhammad wins this fight based off what I've seen. I mean, Ian Gary was able to take the back of Shavkat Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov was only able to take Gary down twice. And Gary's not, I mean, Gary's good, but it's no Bilal Muhammad. I think Bilal Muhammad wins this. But this is a really fun fight because you've got Shavkat, who's definitely got the submission and the finishing ability over a guy like Bilal Muhammad. You've got Shavkat, who's definitely got the striking over a guy like Bilal Muhammad. But you've got the takedown threat of Bilal Muhammad. You've got the control time. You've got the mauling. You've got the pace of Bilal Muhammad across 5 rounds. Who just dominated Leon Edwards, who was a nightmare matchup for Bilal as well. It's a tough one to call, but I think this should definitely be next for the welterweight belt. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Bilal Muhammad sometime in the first half of 2025 when Bilal Muhammad's ready to come back. Shavkat, Bilal, I think it's to happen. And then for the main event, for Kai Asakura, I want to see him versus Amir Albazi. Now, it's again one of those cases where we don't really know how good he is compared to the rest of the division. We had this problem with Steve Erceg. When Steve Erceg got a massive step up against Pantoja and beat him, we didn't really know how good he was compared to the rest of the division because he hasn't built himself up, and that's kind of happened with Asakura, except Asakura just got dominated by Pantoja. He looked really good on the feet. I think we're doing versus Amir Albazi. Amir Albazi's coming off a loss. Well, technically 2 losses to Kai Kara France and now Brandon Moreno. He's outside the top 5. I think this could be a good fight where we can kind of see how good Asakura is. Maybe Amir Albazi just completely out-wrestles Kai Asakura the entire time, but for like a fight night main event in like Japan next year, Kai Asakura versus Albazi, winnable for Kai Asakura if he can work on his takedown defense. I think he'd piece up Albazi on the feet, but again, Albazi's definitely got the grappling to mix it up, and if he can take down Asakura, that's Albazi's fight to win. So, to see how good Asakura is, Asakura versus Albazi. And for Pantoja, there's not really any names left, but I think for one last flyweight fight, and I'll talk about why it's his last flyweight fight, Pantoja versus the winner of Royval and France. I think the UFC, if they're smart, I hope they do this. Brandon Royval versus Kai Kara France #2 in Perth next year. That should be the move to make. Royval's on a 2-fight winning streak, beat Brandon Moreno and just shut down Tatsuro Taira. Kai Kara France should have beaten Amir Albazi, and he's just knocked out Steve Erceg. They're both in a position where they've both lost to Pantoja, and they're both like 1 fight away from a title shot. Put them both against each other, it would be a banger on the feet. Royval's one of the most slick strikers in the division, very light on his feet. Kai Kara France hits like a truck. Put them against each other. Royval versus France in Perth next year. Winner can get another fight against Pantoja, fighting for the belt, which I think Pantoja would win. And if Pantoja can beat the winner of Royval and France, we've got to talk about Pantoja moving up to the bantamweight division and facing like a Marabo Numan and Magomedov for the bantamweight belt. In fact, I think Pantoja should only have 1 more fight left. And I know he said he wants to fight Demetrius Johnson, but Demetrius Johnson recently went out on Twitter and said that he doesn't want to fight anymore because he doesn't have any interest in fighting, which is fair enough. Even though that fight would feed generations, he's out of his prime, he's DJ, he don't want to fight. So let's do Royval versus France. Winner faces Pantoja. Pantoja, if he wins that, give him a title fight in the bantamweight division. But yeah, Pantoja, one of the best in the world, pound for pound, one of the best. But that is my matchmaking after UFC 310. Let me know your thoughts on these fights, if you agree or disagree with the matchmaking. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Thank you for